And I got a message to the young folks, guys. This party's not over. You know what I mean?
Ontario is headed for another shutdown over COVID-19 after a massive rise in cases. And of course, Premier Doug Ford is putting the blame on young people. Now, before I get to debunking that absurdity, first I want to show you here the rise in cases of COVID-19 in Ontario. You can see here, the initial wave back in April, May 2020, what that looked like. And remember our thoughts back then, how deadly it was, and it was, but it's gotten even worse. In January, massive increase, then there was a shutdown again, and then numbers came down. Then we opened back up, numbers shot back up, especially on the new variant, which is why we are shutting down again to hopefully stop the growth of those new variants from spreading because of how dangerous they are, and I'll get to more data on that in a second. On Global News here, they say this is the 8th straight day cases are above 2,000. So Ontario right now in a horrible place. Here's what Doug Ford said about this just a couple days ago.
Here, I just got off the phone from the cabinet and Dr. Williams. The message is, number one, 50% of the cases are with younger people now. And I got a message to the young folks, guys, this party's not over. You know what I mean? You just got to make sure you follow the protocols, follow the guidelines, because what happens, you bring it home to one of your loved ones, your parents, your grandparents. It's unacceptable when we're seeing 50% of the cases from young people. And by the way, the young people, when they get in ICU, they stay there a lot longer, so they're taking up more capacity. So I just can't stress it enough. You go down the street, and especially in Toronto, you just can't. Guys, we got to watch it. This is serious. So please follow the guidelines, protocols, and we still have a ways to go before we can loosen anything up.
So once again, Ontario Premier Doug Ford blaming young people for the rise in COVID-19 cases as if they're not following the guidelines. We've seen a lot of this throughout the pandemic. This from the Star from July. Young people blamed as Ontario sees largest daily number of COVID-19 cases since mid-June. Quote, I don't know why everyone wants to party so badly. Doug Ford urges Ontario youth to follow COVID-19 rules. Well, let's just get to first some satire that points out what should be obvious. The Beaverton here. Doug Ford tells young people with COVID-19 to stop partying and start waiting tables indoors. This from the Toronto Herald, another satirical site. Doug Ford blames young people doing exactly what he told them to do for a recent virus spread. Quote, we've got these kids going to their jobs at essential businesses I unnecessarily reopened, often going in with COVID symptoms because I voted against paid sick days. Then they go back to their apartments with their 4 roommates because there's no affordable housing. It's unacceptable, folks. We have to start taking this virus seriously. It's really all in this quote. I don't even know if I have to really do anything else. Doug Ford against paid sick days. There's no affordable housing. Young people often live with roommates, often work frontline jobs, are an essential job, so they are often public facing. Obviously, they're more at risk of getting COVID-19, and that's exactly what's been going on. So this from CP24. Cortellucci Vaughan Hospital, which is using its ICU exclusively to treat COVID patients, now has 32 of its 35 available beds filled. Quote, last week we had 1 COVID patient in the ICU at Michael Garron. Now we have 11. The average age is 58, ranging from late 30s to 80 years old, and nearly all of them are essential workers or are related to an essential worker through a family contact, Warner said. These are not people who are disobeying the rules. These are people who are trying to make a living and haven't been afforded the protection necessary to minimize their exposure risk. So, when you have these people working frontline jobs, don't have paid sick days, need to be able to afford to live, need to be able to make the rent. They're going to go to work, oftentimes sick, thinking they probably don't have COVID-19 and they can't stay home anyways. So they're going to go to work, likely spread it to more people. Or even if they don't go to work, they're spreading it to people at home. I don't understand why essential workers weren't part of the first wave of vaccinations. I get the need to vaccinate the elderly population, of course. Long-term care Canada has been the worst performer worldwide when it comes to long-term care homes. So clearly there was a need there to vaccinate the elderly population, especially in long-term care. But why not at the same time vaccinate the people that are spreading it and getting it the most? Essential frontline workers in these public-facing positions. Yet still, we're just barely now getting into phase 2, and still essential workers are an afterthought in this entire process. More here from Twitter. So CBC News put out COVID-19 variants of concern have more severe consequences and are more likely to cause the need for hospital and ICU admissions. They are also more likely to be fatal. So you see here hospitalization with the variants of concern much higher than with the regular variant or the initial variant before. ICU admissions, same thing, much higher rate as well as death. So these new variants are hitting people in a way that the old variant didn't. COVID-19 initially, of course, still very contagious, still very deadly. These new variants are much worse. This from NDP leader Andrea Horwath. Doug Ford could have avoided the severity of the third wave by providing the help and supports to protect people in their communities, at their workplaces, and at schools, but Ford just didn't want to spend the money, and now we're facing a more painful lockdown. Here is a clip from Andrea Horwath.
I think it's just unbelievable that Doug Ford was claiming back in February that the numbers were looking rosy when all of the experts were saying the opposite. And they walked us right into this third wave, which could have been avoided. It was absolutely avoidable. At least the severity was absolutely avoidable.
Andrea Horwath here, of course, is exactly correct. And you could have had the NDP and Andrea Horwath as your premier, but instead people voted for the Conservatives and a moron. More here, Rebecca Tucker tweets out, the Ford administration is going to continue parroting its advice to stay home, to stop partying, and to do the right thing. In reality, the failure to implement two specific policy interventions, rent relief and paid sick days, is at almost sole fault here. Rebecca is exactly correct. Looking at the fact that frontline workers are the ones that are getting it the most and spreading it the most, rent relief and paid sick days would have gone a long way to helping those individuals not get it and also not spread it. But instead, you have Ford, of course, not taking any blame and blaming everybody else, blaming individuals for their actions when they're the ones not implementing the right policies to actually stop the spread. Last thing here, Jennifer Keesmaat, who ran for Toronto mayor, ultimately lost, tweets out, in an alternate data-driven COVID universe, we keep small businesses open and we close Costco, Walmart, and large distribution centers. Bang on. Small businesses, of course, have been severely impacted during this pandemic for obvious reasons, but all the while, I mean, for the most part, people have been allowed to shop at Costco, Walmart, and, you know, places like Amazon warehouses, the one in Brampton that I think had about 600 cases, at major fault here for spreading the virus around. Just absolutely insane, the amount of impact that these small companies have felt compared to large companies, which could have taken the hit, could have shut them down, they'd be fine. But instead, you shut down. They shut down small companies, and you have, you know, massive crowds of people in these sorts of stores spreading the virus around. So again, it's been a complete failure from Doug Ford and the Conservative Party from top to bottom since the beginning of this pandemic, and for them to blame anybody but themselves is just completely absurd.